Good morning, and good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to another AuthorAID live video discussion as part of the Research and Proposal Writing MOOC. It's great to see you all. Thank you for making time to join us today, and those of you who are watching the recording of this video clip. My name is Andy Nobes, and I lead the AuthorAID project. And I'm going to hand over now to Dr. Zainab to moderate this session.
Thank you, Andy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We have Unisa Kaltungo from Nigeria, primarily a plastic surgeon, also an AuthorAID steward. I've been with AuthorAID in various capacities for close to 5 years now. Well, I think we should do a quick introduction. Andy has started that. I've done my own introduction. I think we should take Richard next, introduction of the facilitators.
Okay,
Richard?
Thank you, Zainab. Yeah, well, very briefly, some of you have seen me before moderating previous discussions. My name is Richard de Grijs. I am based in Sydney, Australia, at Macquarie University, where I'm an astronomer. I'm also a long-time journal editor, and I'm a steward of AuthorAID, and it's my great pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Richard. Next on my screen, we have Mary. Hi, Mary. Can you do a brief introduction?
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm Ogutu Mary from Ekiti State, southwestern part of Nigeria. I'm presently lecturing in my state university. Nice being with you.
Thank you, Mary. Next, we have Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rebecca Dewey. I have a background in physics, but then I've spent all of my career, including my PhD, working in auditory neuroscience. So using techniques in physics, in MRI, to understand the brain and hearing. And I've spent 18 months or so working with AuthorAID, and I also do a lot of peer reviewing.
Thank you. Next, I have Barbara.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Barbara Pullman from Kenya. I'm a medical doctor, epidemiologist, and public health specialist. I joined AuthorAID in 2016 and has been in AuthorAID in various capacities. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you so much. I think I have all the facilitators now, so we can get right down to business. And thank you very much, our participants, for joining us. So we thought this video, we should discuss some important topics, particularly those that we've seen coming up frequently in the course of the research. Different models of open access.
Hi, Dr. Njoroge here. I'm not sure
Hi,
whether it's just me. The voice keeps breaking.
Yeah, well, I think we had some problems there, Zainab. I think we lost you for a minute. Could you repeat again? Sorry.
Sure, I'll do that. I was saying that in the course of the research course, the course going on right now, we've had a few topics and questions that have been coming up frequently, and we thought to center this video. One of them is about the different models of open access, and Andy has done a lot of work on open access, and I thought he might give us a few just categorization of the different models of open access and any tips you'd like to give us today.
Oh, are you going to me, Zainab? Put me on the spot. Yes. Well, I mean, perhaps the other the course facilitators will like to kind of speak more about their experiences, especially talking in the course. But with regards to open access, we covered this in I think week 2 or 3 when we talked about the different models that you should be aware of as a young researcher. So open access has many advantages. It means that you can share your research with a much broader audience, with the public, with policymakers. It's much easier to share your research. You're more likely to potentially get your research cited by other researchers and scientists. But it's important to be aware that there are different models, different ways of sharing your research. One of these is if you publish in an academic journal, there are several things to consider. There are some journals which are completely open access, so they're specifically open access journals. And by publishing in these journals, sometimes you may be asked to pay a fee, an article processing charge. But this is not always the case, and it's important to be aware that there are many journals that do not charge you an article processing charge. So don't assume that journal publishing means that you have to pay a fee as the author. You don't necessarily have to pay a fee. So that's if you're publishing in an open access journal. There are also journals which are subscription journals, which aren't open to the public, and which you can only get access to if you pay to access the paper or you pay to subscribe to the journal. But quite often, that journal may give you the option of making your paper open access. And again, there may be a charge for that. There is another option that you have, which isn't talked about quite as often. It's quite a slightly confusing model of open access called green open access. And what this means is you self-archive your work. You archive a version of the paper before it is published, and you can share this in an open access repository. So as a brief overview, there are different ways of publishing your research open access, but I think the facilitators might have some more practical experience of this, and have been involved in some interesting discussions during the course.
Richard, would you like to say anything about open access, particularly now during this COVID era? A lot of journals that used to be outside the reach of people from low and middle income countries have made publication free, particularly if they're related to COVID. So Richard, do you have a few words?
Yeah, I can. Well, I can't say much about COVID. That's not my area of research, but I can say something about open access. And one question that came up during the online course that I responded to as well was, why is it so expensive to publish in open access journals? And because the participant thought, well, it's free to the world, so why should I pay to have it published? And my response was that you know, you're not just submitting your paper for publication, but this is managed by a whole team of people. It starts with a managing editor who checks your paper for technical compliance with the author instructions. There is probably a scientific editor or an editor-in-chief. They find reviewers. There's a whole process, and eventually, if it's a high-quality journal, your paper will be published in the journal style. All of that costs money, so that's paying for. Very often, the good journals receive many more submissions than they can actually publish, and so the papers that do get published will have to share the burden of the cost of the journal. This is all assuming that you know, this is a closed box model, of course. Commercial publishers also need to satisfy their shareholders, and they will charge some money to make a profit. So that's why. But subscription journals also cost money, right? Maybe not to you as a researcher, but to your university library. Again, to have it in a closed box model, as a charity, learned societies will charge money to keep their journal running, and very often to actually run the society as well, because the money left over from the journal goes to other activities run by the society. So publishing is not free. Someone has to pay the money. Even journals that are gold or even diamond open access, you submit for free, you publish for free, everything is for free. That still has to be paid for, and often that's paid for by an institution. I think that's all I want to say here.
Yeah, thank you. I recall there was a question, and I think you were the one who responded by one of the participants, something about like if one of the problems with open access is now a lot of predatory journals hide under the open access publications to perpetrate their act. So I don't know if Barbara has anything to say about that, predatory journals, open access, and how they've been able to use that model.
I don't have much experience comparing predatory journals that open access versus those that don't have open access. I think the time at which I maybe had a chance to interact with a predatory journal is they were more interested in the submission fee and the speed of publication. And I don't think they really focus so much on advertising their open access as much as they're advertising how fast they can get your paper published, which may seem quite attractive, especially if you have a deadline to have a publication to submit something, which sometimes may mislead you. So it would be useful to get some guidance from a published colleague about reputable journals which may still be open access where to submit your work.
The question I was referring to was a participant that was asking that, so what model do these predatory journals operate on? Andy, are you still there? What model?
I am, yes.
What model would you classify it under?
I mean, that's an interesting question, Zainab. Technically speaking, what predatory journals are doing, they're replicating the normal what we call gold open access model and charging a fee for publishing the paper, but then they're usually not carrying out peer review. So it's almost like they're mis-selling their service. They're taking a fee for publishing their paper, but they're not actually providing any of the peer review or any of the quality that you may associate with a journal that will usually charge you a fee.
Yeah.
So it's pretending to be a reputable business model, but it's not. But it's often difficult to know that as a young researcher, to know that the peer review is not genuine.
Okay. Thank you. Mary, do you have any comments?
I have a question to Richard.
No, I don't have.
Thank you. Yeah, please go ahead. Mekonnen, is that you?
Yes, I think at some point when you are reading on the section on publishing, something came up about journal reviewers, at those who review articles, that they do it for the glory of it and not for the money. I was given to believe that it's a philanthropic exercise. Now, what Richard has said, it's part of the reasons why you have to pay a fee for the journal processing is because certain people need to be paid. Is this in conflict with what we learned about why one should be a reviewer?
Maybe I can jump in there. But the people who I said would be paid are the editors of the journal and the people managing the journal, the technical staff. The reviewers don't get paid usually.
Yeah.
That's clear.
Thank you. Rebecca, would you want to say something about open access publishing?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a very limited set of experiences in sort of selecting journals because I worked for academic institutions in the UK where we have funds allocated in our grants usually for publication fees, but also most of the institutions that I've worked with and for in the UK, we also very systematically implement green open access. So all of the publications that I've contributed to are placed on an archive maintained by the University of Nottingham that is free to access. And usually they specifically request the sort of final version of the article before it's been typeset. So the publishing house doesn't have their copyright broken per se, because the contribution of typesetting and publishing the article isn't being ripped off by the University of Nottingham. It's just the intellectual property within the article. And so that's a particularly good model. And I suppose one thing I've just found really, really fascinating reading and taking part in the conversations that have been happening on the discussion forum is just the real need to be aware of the potential impact of open access and the ease of open access on the bias that may creep into which publications you're choosing to cite. So if you're doing, particularly if you're doing a systematic review in an area, but any good review, do take a few extra steps to make sure that you've tried to access all of the journals and all of the articles that would help you form a balanced argument in your research, by checking up to see if the authors' institutions publicise those papers, and also through things like ResearchGate and other free to access archives.
Thank you, but just one last point before we leave. You mentioned that when you archive your paper, is it only open to University of Nottingham, or is open to everybody in the UK, or is open to everybody everywhere?
To read the articles, I believe they're open to everybody everywhere. I think they are free to access, and other people are nodding, so that's good. I've never needed to check that anyone without a university login has access to it, but that is the point, that they're free to access for anybody everywhere. And a vast majority now, I think, of good academic institutions with very large numbers of publications coming out of them have these archives specifically for that purpose.
Thank you. So I think we should move to the next question now. There's a question that comes up frequently, at least for every course I've been part of, even when I was a participant of the AuthorAID course, even when I was a participant. And that question is always, how do I arrive at a research gap? And most who ask are about to start or have started their PhD, and they want to know, how do I arrive at a research gap where I can focus my research question and then do my research? So maybe I should start with you, Rebecca. When you did your thesis, how did you arrive at your research question? How did you find the research gap?
I think everybody's journey is going to be slightly different here. It is a very personal journey, because every piece of research is such an individual product of the experiences of all of the co-authors in it. And so in the process of sort of defining your research area, it will depend very, very much on your own experiences and your own passions and your supervisor's experiences and passions. And so I think I would just probably make a really broad overarching statement, and that is, identify something that excites you, that motivates you, that you're going to find you're going to find it easy to motivate yourself to work long, hard hours on, and something you're genuinely interested in. And find some people that you have a good interpersonal connection with who are interested in that field. So you could do that by contacting people through academic websites. So have a browse through the research areas of a university where you might like to attend, you might like to start your research, and get in touch with some people and see, are they looking to take on new graduate students? Are they looking to take on research staff that they can help in sort of starting out in their research field? And have that conversation, open up that sort of two-way channel of saying, what are the things that really excite me about research, and which of those things does this supervisor want to help me pursue, and you'll carve out an area quite naturally. So that was how I started the conversation with the supervisor who took me on to do my PhD. We sat and had a meeting, and she said, I'm really interested in all of these things. And I said, oh, that's good. A couple of those things I'm really interested in. Let's pursue that further. And then over the course of, I guess, a couple of interactions over a couple of months, she said, well, we'll definitely offer you a position then. Good, come to the university. And then over the first sort of 8 months of my PhD, the project started to define itself through those continued conversations and mentorship.
Thank you. I like the point you raised about somebody you really like to work with in your faculty, because I think it's quite important, particularly in, if I can use Nigeria as an example, there's a cultural, there's a huge cultural gap. There's a cultural gap that dictates your relationship with a senior person. So if somebody you can work with, you can easily relate to, I think is very important. So I don't know, Mary, you are from Southwest Nigeria, and I have some relation, and I also schooled in Southwest Nigeria, and I know there's usually this huge gap between the senior and the junior. So what would your advice be about how to approach a senior person about getting a research topic? Mary?
Well, I don't think, just like we have said, from the cultural difference between the senior and the junior here, just like you said, the cultural difference between us here, it's not even really easy for us to get that research question here. Like going to meet your senior is not really all that possible for us here. So I don't think I can say much concerning that. We are having that serious problem in this part of the world. Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. I heard you.
They're having that problem in this part of the world. And that is why you have to search and search and search. And even sometimes, even when you have the research question, you don't have the samples, you don't have the available resources to even support you. Even the library, you won't have access to go to the library to get some of the things you need to support your research question. So we are having that serious problem in this place. Thank you.
Thank you. Mekonnen, are you still with us? How did you arrive at your research question?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I do work on field work sometimes. Would have research over, we will go out for research, and as a college, as a university, would have thematic area, or the problem, special research problem, just identified first. It's known, it's registered on the university level, so we simply incorporate into that thematic area, and then we do work our research, or we'll investigate, or we do research by the need of our community. So thematic area or research problems or research gaps are just identified as a university level. So we are working on that right now. Yeah, thank you.
That's interesting. So you already have areas as good as mapped out for you. You only need frame your question around such areas.
Right, that is.
That makes it really easy, I think. I don't know if okay, let me call Richard out on this one, because you've been in China for a while, and the impression the outside world, at least I have of China, is a lot of things are tailored to specific areas. Do you have what do you have to say about that, Richard? Is that how it is in the it was in the university you were with in China?
No, not really. China actually operates pretty similarly to Western countries in most of these aspects. What you do as a senior staff member, as I was, you apply for grants, and if you get a grant, that grant often includes money to hire one or more PhD students, or at least to pay for their top-ups, because in China, the institution pays for the basic living expenses, but that's really not enough to live on. So you have to pay for top-ups so that students can actually live properly. And they tend to come to you as a senior staff member, and they say, well, I'd like to work in your group to possibly do my PhD. What projects do you offer? And so, you give them a number of suggestions of projects that might work within the area that you're working in. And eventually they decide in their second year who they would like to work with as their PhD advisor. PhDs in China take 4 to 5 years. So the first year is coursework. And then if they happen to choose you, you work with the student in more detail to actually frame the question and see what's feasible within the time frame, etc. And that's not too different from what's happening in Western countries. At the moment, I am a senior faculty member in Australia. I advertised. I had a number of, when I came here, I had a startup grant. I had a number of PhD positions on offer. I advertised them on the university website or international job sites. And so you get applications, and then you talk to promising applicants on Zoom in this particular case, and you actually develop a project together that way. So that's pretty similar.
Oh, great. Barbara, would you like to tell us your experience? What's your experience with that?
Thanks, Zainab. I think my experience may be a little bit unique because where I was working, we had just come out from a different TB screening study for people living with HIV. And I was curious about what would happen if we extended this screening to HIV negative individuals. And coincidentally, at the same time, the same team of mentors who were involved in the initial study was starting up a different study with TB screening also, with slightly different models for different areas. I think they had a facility-based model, a community-based model. They had a contact screening model, and there was a fourth model. So after expressing my interest to them and mentioning that I needed to focus on HIV negative individuals, we discussed that, and they helped me narrow it down to a population of children under 5. And I was able to be incorporated into that particular study, where one of the team members served as a mentor. So I could say my experience is a little bit unique. And maybe following your review, I realized all I knew about contact investigation was only done in high-income countries, where the screening is so intense. I think one case of TB, you have all these concentric layers of screening of up to 5 or 6 different people. And looking at it where we live, where we're talking about 100,000 cases per year or more, that sounds a little bit unrealistic. So there were unique situations in Kenya which actually showed that this was a total gap in my country where there's no screening for children under 5. So that's sort of how I came up with my research question.
Thank you. Would any of the participants want to chip in something? Claude? Claude, at CEFA, what was your experience? How did you arrive at your research question? Well, I was wondering though, Barbara, what do you think? Because I always assumed that sometimes you could get your research topic by similar to what you did, or maybe in a reverse manner, walk up to one of your would-be supervisors and ask them what they're working on, or do you have any topic in mind that you could use for your PhD thesis? What do you think about that?
Sorry, you may have to repeat your question. I think I missed part of it.
I was asking about a reverse of how you arrived at your research topic. What do you think about students approaching their would-be supervisors or mentors and asking them if they have a topic they're working on or they thought they would work on and probably use that for their PhD thesis?
Unfortunately, I think the experiences I've had or seen is that most senior colleagues who are very experienced and knowledgeable and have all this information And I think maybe it's, maybe they are not aware that it would be important if they shared it with the junior person, because the person who's junior does not know that this senior person has all this information. If somebody junior would approach you and say, oh, I'm interested in studying something on diabetes, I think based on all the knowledge and experience they have, they could point the person to some literature, they could point the person to a particular individual who can help them, or tell them something. But usually the expectation is you as a junior person should know what you want, which is pretty much, you're very lost when you're there looking through all this work and you're saying, I need to do this PhD and I need to do this master's project, and I have no idea what to do. And having worked in a research institution, for me, that was easy because we were always writing. The job that I always had to approach people to review things and mentor me through so many things. So that was an easy process. Even navigating, finding my supervisor, my external supervisor, that was an easy process to go through. When compared to my colleagues who are in the university, who have no access to a research institution, who had to go through everything from scratch.
Thank you. I noticed we have another participant joined from behind you. You're welcome. Okay, so thank you so much. We're almost out of time, so I think we should go to our next topic about tips on applying for grants. And I think Richard and Barbara will come in very handy here, and Deborah too. Rebecca. So what are your tips for applying for grants? Let's start from Rebecca. Rebecca, are you still with us? I don't see you.
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yeah, hiya. Again, I think I'll probably make some fairly overarching comments and then maybe a couple of little specific bits of advice. So I think first and foremost, the most important thing is to really clearly understand what you're trying to do and understand what the application process is requiring you to do. So read the application form very, very carefully and read all of the guidance really, really carefully. It might not necessarily be the most intuitive set of questions to your research project. So don't get caught out by answering the question that is slightly easier to answer rather than the question that they're actually asking. And I always use one example. I've spent many years reviewing for a researcher development grant, which was a travel grant. People would submit their research proposals, but actually the guidance for the grant were stipulated that you needed to focus most of your attention on the benefit to yourself as a researcher and on obtaining transferable skills, whereas quite a lot of the applicants ignored that piece of advice and spent most of the words telling us how good their research area was and how they were going to be excellent if they got the money. So just really following all the instructions, make sure that you're using the word count wisely, but don't go over it. Read the instructions, answer the exact question that they're asking. In terms of really understanding the impact of your research, I always like to use the example of why should I care? So if you're explaining to somebody, maybe your next door neighbor, your mother-in-law, why should I care about your research? That's what you really need to get across to the funding panel. And remember that the funding panel is probably made up of a lot of very busy people who don't have a lot of time to try to spend ages trying to understand what your project is. So make it really clear.
Thank you. Richard, tips on applying for research grants?
Two things. First, of course, I agree with Rebecca. What I always tell my students is writing a grant application is not the same as writing a paper. When you write a paper, you start from the introduction, you go through the whole paper to the end, and perhaps your main, the most important results come towards the end of the paper. In an application for a grant, you start with the most important aspects. So you have to make an impact right away so that the reviewers will actually continue to read what you've written. Now, if you've got 10 pages, the big grants allow you to write up to 10 pages of science case. And so you don't want to lose your reviewers, you know, after the first page. Put all of that information on the first page. Do this, for instance, by adding an executive summary. That could be half a page, it could be a page, depending on how much space you have in total. Make sure that your objectives are right there on the first page in bullet points. And here in Australia, actually, the first page is so important that most institutions have a so-called first page club, where people from within the department get together, you know, a couple of weeks before the main grant deadlines, and they read each other's first page to see if it makes that impact that you need for the reviewer to really pay attention. So that's really the key thing I want to get across in terms of applying for grants. The other thing I want to say is, if you don't have experience, you've got to start somewhere. And Rebecca mentioned travel grants. They're a good starting point. Throughout my career, I've been very opportunistic. You know, I get emails and, you know, information about possible grants out there. And when I see a grant out there that sounds interesting, I think by myself, is this something I would like to spend some time on and have the chance of getting something out of it that might be useful for me. I may have to shape it around my project, or shape the project around the grant guidelines, and just go for it. Be opportunistic, and you never know where that might actually lead you. I've had a few grants throughout my career that led me in completely unexpected directions, make me some good friends in countries I'd never expected to collaborate with. And it's great fun, actually. So yeah, that's maybe a bit of advice. If you're open to it, be opportunistic.
I particularly liked the idea of the first page club, so that you take turns reading, and then you can, it's like peer reviewing for each other. I really like that idea.
Yeah, so we spend like half an hour to an hour. Everyone brings their first page. We read, you know, one or two other first pages individually, and then we provide feedback to the applicant.
Oh, great, I like that. Barbara, what are your tips?
First, I agree with all the tips that are mentioned by Rebecca and Richard. Maybe I'll start on the point Richard mentioned last about travel grants. Having worked in research and having access to lots of data, we had a huge HIV program. We took advantage of all the HIV conferences over the years, and I think after a number of times we were able to attend so many of these meetings that we would almost say we would meet next year at the next meeting, because we became very efficient in writing travel grants and travel courses and all that. The thing is, take advantage of small grants. I think there are grants that are about £1,000, £5,000 to do a small scale research. Start there and start working towards there. If you can, email the program person if you get a rejection, and send a plea and say, you know, I'm junior and I would like to know if possible you could give me the review comments. I think I've received two review comments from two different individuals where they were not even supposed to give out review comments. They would just send you a rejection, which those rejections are quite hard. I think you work so hard and wait for 3 or 4 months, get all these people busy to write an application, and then you have to go back and tell all of them, I'm really sorry I took your time, but things didn't go out as planned. Attend as many courses as possible. Each time I've gone to a meeting and there's somebody talking about grant writing or writing for publications, I like attending at any conference or even online courses because there's always something new. You'll get there and you think you know how to write, and somebody says something, and even in this forum as we're talking right now, I mean, everybody says something different, and you get to learn. Even at each AuthorAID facilitation course, I think we get to learn more sometimes from the participants, because we get to know more also from each other and from the participants. The other thing is mentors. I think young scientists are suffering a lot because we need mentors. I think sometimes you really need someone to pick you up and show you what to do, especially when it comes to these large grants. You need somebody to be there to help you write and sort of let you be the lead, because I think we have people who are very happy to let you do all the work, and they do all the submissions. I think I've heard of somebody mentioning how the person wrote the grant, a whole NIH grant, but the person is not the lead on the grant because of being misadvised by the senior professor who submitted the grant, which I thought was really sad, because this is a very junior person who, I believe that would have been very nice on the person's resume to be running such a huge grant as the PI of the grant. The other thing is you may need teams to write the grant with, which you also need that mentor to help you find the right team. And sometimes you're looking at a totally wrong grant. I think I've looked at some grants that were totally not for me. I shared some of them with my PhD supervisor, and he mentioned one of them is, do you know Professor so-and-so who runs this ethics program in the country? This is the kind of grant she should be applying for, not you. This is the kind of thing. Yeah, you are not in ethics at all. You're a junior person. It's a very senior person who runs the ethics IRB in the country. This is the kind of person who should be applying for that kind of grant. And try and serve as a reviewer. I think I've served as a reviewer, and I realize sometimes the things you're being asked, the review criteria, sometimes do not really come out clearly to the person making the application. Because when you look at the application and they say these are the criteria, and then you look at the review criteria given to the reviewer, I've had the opportunity to be on both sides and seen that I don't think I would have made this at this point. And I think I was told in a training once that you should remember your reviewers are very busy people who are very tired, who are reviewing this thing at the end of their day. That happened to be me once. I was in the US operating on a different time zone, and I was told you must finish at this time, UK time, because we are having our meeting tomorrow. And I actually felt sad for the people who made the application, because I had a tight timeline to finish, and I had to go through so many applications. And you feel that there are a few good ones, and you rate those ones high enough and hope that somebody else also rated them well, so that when they average or whatever score they use, they'll get selected. So try and make many applications, which is also hard. And nobody wants to mentor you through many applications. You say, wait for that one to come out, and you wait for 3 or 4 months and still it doesn't come out successful. So hope we in this forum, once at some point when we get to the position where we can mentor people through grants, let's remember to look for the junior scientists who are interested and help them grow up through that point. We may not be able to change people we are looking out to right now. Of course, there are some who are willing to mentor us, but let's try and change ourselves as we go that way. Thanks, Zainab.
Thank you so much, Barbara. One thing that is central to writing a grant is preparing your CV. And I remember at one point how I started the habit of updating my CV. We had just come back from a conference and we had made a paper presentation. We're still in training residency. And then my colleague was, oh, yeah, I can't wait to get home. I'm putting that conference and my paper presentation on my CV. And that was when it occurred to me, oh, why wait until you have to submit the CV before you update it? So constantly updating it is a good one. And what I do is I update my CV the moment I complete a task that I think should go on a CV, and then I email it to myself, so that if anything happens, my computer crashes, I still have it. I don't know, I can see Deborah, Rebecca is smiling. I keep calling you Deborah. Rebecca is smiling. What do you have to say about that, updating your CV?
Yeah, I completely agree. My CV is a live document. Every time I get a review request from a new journal, that goes straight on there as soon as I've sent the review back. Every little travel grant, every abstract that's accepted to a conference. So I have a very long master CV version, which is about 8 pages long. And then when somebody asks me for my CV, I can just click save as and chop out all the things I don't need. So I don't need to think about different versions. I just have a big version. And then when somebody says, oh, I need a 2-page CV with your publications on, then I just chop out all the things that aren't relevant. I think applying the 1-page rule again from Richard's grant application peer support group is another really good one. Consider the first page of your CV an executive summary. Have a good statement of your research interests, your current job, very short highlights of previous jobs, skills that you want to bring to the fore. And that might change quite rapidly depending on whether you're applying for jobs and what kind of jobs you're applying for, or whether you're using it for grant applications and that sort of thing. And yeah, so I was smiling because I was agreeing with what you were saying, and have it somewhere useful, have it somewhere handy. So for you, that's in your email inbox. I have a cloud server, so it could be the thing in your Google Drive or whatever it is you have, so that it's handy and you can send it out. And do send use a nice clear formatting, so that again, someone who's in a hurry, who's maybe got 20 CVs on their desk, they can just scan down some nice emboldened or underlined headings and really get the information that they need very quickly. And send it as a PDF is another good way to make sure that whatever application they open in doesn't sort of ruin your formatting and make all the boxes jump around.
Thank you. I like that tip of sending it as PDF. Richard, do you have any comments, any tips, particularly related to the CV?
I think Rebecca's explanation was, spot on. I also have a very long CV that I take things out as necessary. My publications list is separate from the CV because it gets too long. That's because I've been in the field for a while. Yeah, and so I order it by, so the first 2 pages are kind of standard in my CV, like jobs, education, honors, appointments and stuff like that. And then I order it by things that have the highest impact. For instance, international committees I serve on, things like that. So just to show that you have reached a certain status in the field, that people recognize you. Now, I realize that it takes time to get to that status, of course. So, for instance, I'm a senior staff member. I don't actually usually include the talks I give at conferences anymore. But it depends on your stage of career to see what you want to include and what you don't want to include.
Thank you. Thank you. Just on time, we're finishing at the dot of 1 hour now. So I don't know if any of the participants have any questions, comments. The chat box has been very busy. Any more? Would anybody like to address anything before we close?
Connor has it hand up. Yeah.
I don't have a question. On the grant proposal writing and updating CV, most of the time, in third world countries, especially in Ethiopia, where I'm working right now, we don't have thematic areas or research problems which are narrow and specific, area specific, local. So our people try to write a grant paper for that purpose. Okay. So they don't have narrow and specific research question. It can't be, it's not good enough to submit it to international grant proposal. So what can we do on this situation? So thank you.
Should I direct, Barbara, I'd like to direct that at you.
Thanks, Mekonnen. I think when you're submitting a response to a grant application, I know it's different where you have maybe unsolicited applications where you may send something that you've drafted based on the challenges that you've seen. But if you're writing in response to a particular grant, you could take the research problem that is unique to your setting and see how it fits within that application. Because we may say we are looking at maybe preparedness research, and we are talking about preparedness for epidemics, and we are talking about whatever epidemic that may be there. And maybe in your country you have, let's say, floods, and the flood into epidemics. Maybe you've been trying to write grants around managing the floods, and you've not been addressing the epidemics that come before or after or as a result of the floods. So try and think through the problem that you have and see how you could customize your application to that specific call. And maybe realize you may not be able to solve the challenge totally, or maybe in the way that you want to address it. But I'm sure you could find a way if whatever problem you have is sort of aligned to the call that has been sent out for the grant application. So it needs some thinking through, and maybe also needs some guidance. Some people can tell you this has been done, this hasn't been done, some literature review. So it's always a loss because funders have their own requirements. Sometimes they have their own sort of targets and policies for a particular amount of money that they've set aside for grants for that particular year.
I particularly liked your last but one point about speaking with somebody who's a little more experienced. They might know how to couch the topic so that it fits into the funders' specifications. I liked that. So, Mekonnen, are you happy with that response, or would you like me to call on a few more facilitators?
Yeah, I got everything. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Any more questions? Okay, so I think I'll hand over to Andy now. Thank you, everybody. I think it's been a very stimulating session. Andy?
Okay, Asefa, are you about to ask a question? No? Okay. If there are no more questions, then I think we've come to the end of our discussion video today. We will be recording this clip and we'll be sharing it on the course for all course participants. And if you have any other questions, outstanding questions that we've not been able to answer in this time, and I know there's been a few discussions in the chat box, please do post them in the forum and we will get one or more of our facilitators to respond to you. There's one more question that's just come in from Asefa. Do you reckon that anybody's got time to answer it? He says the entry point for international grant calls is very tight and he's tremendous experience. So what do you suggest to improve this situation? I think Richard's provided a short response to that so far.
Yeah. Act locally.
Yeah.
And Barbara.
First.
Yeah.
Find an experienced mentor. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
some very quick fire responses there. Practice locally first, seek guidance from a mentor. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. If any other outstanding questions, please do ask them in the forums. Oh, now lots of questions are coming through, but I think we've come to the end of our time today for our facilitators, particularly for Richard, who it's now tomorrow morning. It's now past midnight. So thank you very much for joining, everyone, and please feel free to continue discussions in the discussion forums, and we'll do our best to respond there in a bit more detail to any of these kind of issues that have come up today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye. Thank you and bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.